All right, we are live. Welcome back to another edition of Elevate Your Grind, brought to you by the Cannabis Lab. I am your host, Todd Rosales, and welcome to our very first discussion of the week. Folks, we are up over 110 episodes. We have had some phenomenal names and some phenomenal guests, and they just keep getting better. I want to thank you for your continued support. We're actually coming up on our 1-year anniversary. That episode is going to be on Monday, January 25th. So we're going to come to you that week with a special bonus episode of Elevate Your Grind. We're going to bring back our very first guest and the founder of Cannabis Lab, Robert Friedman. So that is an episode you don't want to miss. Robert and I are going to kind of reflect back on the year of doing these podcasts, what's changed, what we liked, what we didn't like. And then, of course, we're going to talk about the excellent event that is coming up on February 6th. That is the annual C-Lab conference. It is going to be socially distanced. Masks will be required. We're going to be doing temperature checks. It is going to be a good time for everybody to come out and see all their friends from a 6-foot or more distance, of course, but it should be a really good time starting to get back into normalization here. Of course, if you're uncomfortable or you're unable to join us in person down in Miami at Sacred Space, you are welcome to join us virtually. You can check out those details at joinclab.com. Either way, if you're able to show up in person or if you're able to attend virtually, it is not an event that you're going to want to miss. If you went to the conference last year, you know exactly what I'm talking about. A lot of the guests that we've had on throughout the years are going to be speaking at the conference. Of course, I will be broadcasting all day from the conference, talking about to our different expo guests and everybody else. So definitely tune in right here, facebook.com/Cannabusiness Group. And of course, if you want to see the panels, it's going to be at joinclab.com. Folks, if you missed our episode last week with Ben and Vinny Solani from High Life Farms, you can check that out at our YouTube page or any audio platform. So Apple, Spotify, iHeart, Stitcher. Does anyone really listen to podcasts outside of Apple and Spotify? Maybe iHeart. There's like a ton of platforms. I don't know if they're useful. So Apple Podcasts, Spotify, search for Elevate Your Grind. Of course, if you want to see the video version, that's at youtube.com/Elevate Your Grind. All right, enough for announcements. My guest today has a very, very impressive background, and I'm very excited for this conversation today. Like I said, we have a lot of different topics on this show. We talk to brands, we talk to service providers, we talk to cultivators, we talk to investors, we talk to lawyers. We learn all these great things about the adult use, the rec market, the medical market. But really what's going to drive this industry forward and what's going to drive this plant forward is the science behind it and being able to do research and everything else along those lines. So on that note, we brought in a very special guest today who is focusing in those areas. Before the recording started, I told him, and I kind of mean this, that hopefully I have the education to keep up with him, because I'm sure, listen, a lot of the interviews I read with him were extremely interesting. It just, I had to read them with a dictionary next to my computer as well, too, so I can figure out some of the things he was talking about. But without any further ado, please welcome Jonathan Vaught from Front Range Biosciences. Jonathan, thanks for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, absolutely, man. The pleasure is all mine. So, I really meant what I said as far as the science behind this is really what's going to advance us, right? Because there's so many different use cases for the plants and so many different pieces that are still unexplored that are just being brought to fruition, right? When people look at cannabinoids and other things, they're talking about CBD and THC, which is 2 of just hundreds. So you didn't come from cannabis originally. It's not like you've been a cannabis scientist your whole life, but you come from a very scientific background. So before you start going into the large unpronounceable words and processes, give us a little bit of your backstory and how you ended up in the cannabis space.
Yeah, absolutely. So as you mentioned, I have a fairly extensive background in biotechnology, including
let's also mention, when we say this, a Ph.D., right? So we're talking, yeah. I should have addressed you as doctor. I apologize for that. So let's make sure that we establish the credibility there.
Absolutely. So I do have a PhD in organic chemistry from the University of Colorado Boulder. And I've been a serial entrepreneur about as long as I can remember. Before starting Front Range Biosciences, I spent about 15 years leading cross-functional teams, developing new technologies and building companies, primarily in human diagnostics, but also food safety. I started my career while I was in grad school in biotech, where I ended up developing the core technology for a startup company called SomaLogic, which is a human diagnostics company it's focused on mostly serving the healthcare world and pharma by providing lab tests for things like target validation, clinical trial data submission to the FDA, and even building regulated consumer lab tests for providers like Quest Diagnostics, and then intellectual property portfolio development. So I helped grow that company from about 20 people to over 120 people during the 6 years after I worked for them after my PhD. And then I also was part of a founding team of another startup called Beacon Biotechnology that was focused on the food safety space. And then also another company, Velocity Sciences, that was on the human side and also focused on next generation lab test and assay development, primarily in the healthcare sector.
Dude, so I mean that's awesome. All the things that you were involved in, just especially the human diagnostic thing. And from the outside in, it almost looks like there's a disconnect from, we'll call it kind of the scientific, I don't want to say the scientific community, but kind of the healthcare community and the cannabis community, right? And I've had medical doctors on the show before, and one of my number one questions is as you're exploring in your past lives, how familiar and how often did you talk about or did you come across things like the endocannabinoid system? And someone who's doing human diagnostic stuff, is this something important that was just being glanced over? Because I love seeing someone with your background, we'll call it coming to the dark side of cannabis, right? But realistically, you're looking at
say the other way around.
Where,
you say leaving the dark side and coming to the light side. Who knows?
Well, that Reefer Madness campaign pinned us as the dark side, but you're 100% true. People don't realize that pharmaceuticals, for the most part, are derived from plants originally, right? So all we're doing is copying that same process with a plant that just had a really bad PR campaign against it, right? So how do you go? I don't want to say how do you go, but where is the interest in everything that you're doing? Because you can continue down that path to now going to cannabis, something that, they don't allow research on too much, and it's very regulated and limited. Where is the interest that brought you into our space?
Yeah, absolutely.
Your space now too.
Yeah. Well, so I also forgot to mention, I founded a 501c3 nonprofit, Mountain Flower Dairy, which is an educational nonprofit in Colorado that's focused on educating the public on where their food comes from. So across the span of my career, when cannabis started to become legal, and I recognized it in the intersection, honestly, of cannabis legalization or decriminalization, even with agriculture, with human health, and some of the big disconnect, honestly, that I saw in the human healthcare space. I saw it as really the biggest opportunity of a lifetime, right? When I look at cannabis plant, again, I'm an organic chemist by training, and you said it perfectly well. A lot of people don't realize this, but pretty much almost every small molecule drug that comes from big pharma, it all starts with plants and natural products. And then they modify it and get it into forms that can be put into pharmaceutical products. But at the end of the day, it all starts with plants. And it turns out, although a lot of organic chemists would kick me under the table if they were sitting here, they would. It turns out nature does it better in a lot of ways in science. And so, even though we've come a really incredible long ways, especially in the last 2 decades, from a technology perspective. But yeah, I think there's a huge opportunity. And I do think the endocannabinoid system is something that's just, we're barely scratching the surface of what we know. And unfortunately, because of this bad PR campaign, we literally closed the door on, the opportunity for the last 75 years, 100 years, to really understand the endocannabinoid system and even think about, how to manage health or wellness, through it. So yeah, I think it's unfortunately it's one of those dark periods in science where where the bad PR took over and science wasn't able to rule the day. But now that's all changed, right? And I think in especially the last 5 years, or even 10 years, the opportunity now to do research for companies like ours to develop these new genetics that we can bring interesting new cannabinoids, interesting new compounds to market, the opportunity to do that is unprecedented.
So I want to ask you more about Front Range now, but after this, I want to circle back to Mountain Flower Dairy because I've heard some cool stories that you talking about. Really, just get into the weeds there. But yeah, tell me more about Front Range. So what is, as far as I can tell, you guys are really starting from the beginning there, helping people with their genetics, with the cloning process, with getting a lot of help, just figuring out nurseries, figuring out what plants grow in the best atmosphere. And that's something that I've just recently kind of come across. We did a virtual grow tour with a company called Seed and Smith in Colorado as well. You might be familiar with them. And they educate us a lot on the growing process. And one of the things that Brooks, the CEO, said was that they try to find strains that do well within their growing environments versus trying to adjust their grow to specific strains. And that's not something I've heard too many other people talk about. So obviously, Colorado, you've got one atmosphere. Down here in Florida, it's very humid, and it might be indoor grow, might be a combined use and everything else. So you guys truly get down deep into the science of not just cannabis, but kind of agriculture in general. This is me trying to, assume your answer here.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a lot to unpack here, and I think there's maybe a couple levels of answers to your question and response. Just to give you a quick overview of Front Range and who we are and what we do. We were founded in 2015. We currently have about 85 employees, spanning Colorado, California, and an R&D outpost in Barcelona, Spain, at the CRAG, which is one of Europe's leading agricultural research institutes. So that's just a quick glimpse of the company. And to date, we've raised over $45 million, into the company to support our growth. We're really consider ourselves the first true cannabis genetics platform company. So it includes hemp as well, but to us, scientifically, it's all the same plant, the genus Cannabis. And the platform's built on a foundation of genetics, next generation breeding technologies, and tissue culture. We've really modeled the platform after a lot of other platforms that came before it in other crops, and really focused on plant breeding and seed development. So we combine our expertise in genetics and breeding with services and sales of seeds and plants or clones that are capable of delivering reliable, reproducible, high quality results to the grower. From our perspective, as we talked about, we think this plant's the most exciting agricultural development in modern history. It represents an ingredient platform for everything from recreational cannabis products to wellness products, dietary supplements, industrial materials, animal feed, and even plant-based protein. And when you look at the supply chain for each of those categories, genetics really sit at the foundation, and that's where we're focused. And what we've been able to do at Front Range is really combine all of the different components of the platform and complete this 360-degree cycle now, from concept to lab to greenhouse to true product differentiation, and really be able to deliver on the vision of genetics in a wide range of product categories across the cannabis and hemp industries. And so at the end of the day, what we're really trying to do is leverage our science and provide access to all of the research and development that we've done to provide our partners, which are all cannabis companies, brands, growers, and producers, with a product pipeline in genetics that delivers their consumers not just another way to get high, but new experiences.
Dude, so where you guys are is so far beyond everybody's general knowledge of the plant, just from a component standpoint. Because I know, and they're not exactly ingredients of the plant, because plants don't have ingredients, but you're looking at the components of it. You're not just looking at, so to start, most people's general knowledge of cannabis is either they call it hemp or cannabis, which, like you said, is wrong. But you've got sativa, you've got indica, you've got hybrid. And then we learned that that's kind of all bullshit. They're all hybrids, and we need to look at their terpene profile. And you guys are even going further. It's not just you're looking at cannabinoids, you're looking at terpenes, you're looking at flavonoids, which I don't even know what they are. I'm lucky that I even pronounced it remotely close. But realistically, when you're looking at the genetics, It's how do we make something that's high in that has this terpene profile or this makeup of components so it has the desired effect? Is that kind of what you guys are looking at, is to create these new and really create these medical and wellness components, right? Am I on the right path here?
Yes, absolutely. And I think you hit on something at the beginning of your question, which was, the grower that you had on, or the CEO of the company you had on previously, that said, they focus more on what grows well in their environment versus, trying to grow, specific genetics in their environment. And, what we really look at it from the top down, we look first at the ingredient in the product category, right? So, whether it's flour, or whether it's an oil or an extract, or whether it's, a full spectrum or a whole spectrum, type of extract going into a dietary supplement, or the hemp industry, we look there first, right? Because that's what's actually driving, what the farmer is going to take, or the company is going to take from that genetic or that plant. But then the next level down is, okay, so let's say we've got a really unique terpene and cannabinoid profile that gives the user a really unique experience. Then we want to be able to enable growers in every environment to be able to produce it, right? And to give them, access to that. So, we have growers, for example, in the California cannabis, market, which is where we're most active on the cannabis side. We have growers that grow indoors, mixed light greenhouse, hoop houses, tunnel houses, and then just outdoors. So we really cover the full spectrum of different growing environments. And our goal is to not only be able to provide access to these unique molecules like cannabinoids, or terpenes, or even some of the flavonoids that we're working on, but it's also for them to be able to grow those plants effectively in their specific growing environment, so they can really achieve improved margins and profitability from their growing operations.
Dude, that's awesome. So you have the ability to kind of look at, hey, we're looking for something with this effect. This is where we grow it, and you can almost create what they're looking for to grow in their grow, for lack of a better term. I mean, I imagine like you guys are almost like rock stars in the grower community because you can make shit happen.
Yeah, that's where we're at right now, and that's the next stage, the next evolution of the company. And we're already in conversations and partnering with several different brands and large growers. We're also going to be opening up a new cannabis genetics business unit in Colorado this year, for the licensed or the regulated cannabis market there. And we're really here to be able to partner with these companies. And at the end of the day, we're not a consumer facing company, right? We partner with those companies, but we can provide the science, the know-how, and access to our team, which is one of the world's largest and deepest, most experienced R&D teams in cannabis genomics, in cannabis breeding. And so while yes, we can more or less customize and develop these things, it takes time, right? And so it really is a partnership. It's not, abracadabra, now we're going to give you, a plant that grows well with very little light, very little water, nutrients, and you can put it in the corner of your warehouse, and you're still going to get product, right? It takes time, right? And it really, it's something that, can take, months to even years, depending on what we're talking about, right? But, we also look at it through the lens of multi-generational products, right? So there's like first generation product, for example, a new minor cannabinoid like CBG or CBC, or even something more exciting like THCV. We put a product out there, right? Then we work with the growers. We may have one partner customer that's, growing indoors, and we have to do a series of breeding events or selection events, to find the line or the variety that provides that cannabinoid in that environment. And it may be a different product line for another customer that's growing outdoors, right? And one of the nice things about the platform is we have the ability to offer these services and support to these growers for their specific growing environment, right? And really help them optimize. And then at the end of the day, we offer up opportunities for white labeling these genetics, where we provide them or license them, the opportunity to take them and brand them themselves.
Dude, I'm really really into what you're talking about here, because I talk all the time about this industry really kind of being an intersection and needing a collaboration between your traditional cannabis people and, I say, Wall Street and corporate people, right? That there needs to be a mix, because a lot of us at the finance side and everything else, we were closeted cannabis advocates and closeted cannabis consumers, but there were licenses and different things that kept people from coming out of the closet, if you will. You make me realize that I left out an entire different group where you all belong, not that you're not part of the entrepreneurial part, but also scientists, right? The people that really understand the science behind this plant, the reactions of the inputs that you put into the plant, the years of breeding, the processes associated with it. So when you look at your typical cannabis grower or cultivator, even if it's multi-generation, a lot of that education just comes from years of doing it and trial and error and trying different things and trying different products and everything else. And where I see, you and your team fitting in the best is being able to put more focus on that and being able to kind of accelerate it, right? Whereas you don't need to have the education of a multi-generation family that's been doing it, that some kid, I want to say some kid, but someone who's been doing this for a little bit of time can get a much larger education from you and your team, because he actually understands why his trial and error turned out the way it did, and then can come to you, say, hey, we're looking to grow this. These are the inputs I have. What are your thoughts, right? And you guys can help them. I know I'm speaking very, very high level here, but I truly see the value that you're bringing to the industry, because you're putting the true science behind it, and you're kind of taking where everyone kind of picked up where they left off 75 years ago. And you're like, wait a second, we've got all this other research that's coming out of other places, from other plants and from everything else. We can apply this to cannabis and make it work.
Yes, absolutely. And I think, one of the things that we can offer is that, when you look at implementing science and technology like this into, especially into a living system like plants, it does take time. It does take significant dollars invested. It takes millions and millions of dollars of genomics research to even be able to start to understand what you're looking at. And, and I think what we offer, because we've really stayed focused on that, and we've really stayed focused on, the very beginning of the supply chain, the genetics, the development of these, and then not only that, but how to then take them through the nursery process, through the scale-up process, through the productization process, and then take it to market, right, through different products with our partners. So, that's really what we bring to the table. And look, it's kind of funny when you think about, the different folks, and you talked about the traditional, or folks that have been in the cannabis industry for a long time, even before it was quote legal or becoming legal. And then you look at, some of the newcomers to the industry and the finance and then the scientists and all that. At the end of the day, we had our company at Front Range Biosciences, we have a group of people that love this plant. We have people that believe in the power of this plant. We truly, we're not just scientists and entrepreneurs and business folks with professional backgrounds. We also really like this plant, and we think that it has, incredible potential to change, people's approach to wellness and supplements and recreation and healthier alternatives to things like alcohol. We're big fans of it. And, and I think that passion for this plant and for what we're trying to create and help provide a window to this science for the traditional cannabis and the legacy cannabis groups, is really what gets us excited, right? The ability to take these products to the next level. And at the end of the day, that's what consumers are looking for, right? It's like every other CPG industry. It's no longer about just getting high. It's about that next level experience. It's about a unique experience for the consumer.
I couldn't agree with you more. And I love hearing about the passion. I mean, that's, I like to name drop her all the time because I don't want to take credit for the quote, but Carson Humiston of Banks was telling me, she's like, people in this industry, they're passionate. They're not bankers. They're here because they want to be. And that's what I love seeing, because that's when you get the results. And you can tell that whenever you go to a conference, anything else. And I can tell that talking from you and how you guys are breaking down the plant and being, being a part of every different part of the industry, you can see it, right? And what I believe is, as folks like you start breaking down the plant and coming out with new products that have much more of a medicinal, wellness, or even industrial focus, it's going to more normalize the adult recreational market, right? Because when we talk about the cannabis industry and you talk about it to somebody off the street, what's the first thing they do? They make drug jokes, they make getting high jokes, even if they're interested in it, right? There's a lot of jokes. There's more puns than, listen, we've heard all the puns in our industry. You don't have to make them for us. We've heard all of them multiple times. But I think as cannabis becomes more the commodity that it's going to end up being, and it finds its way into all these other industries or verticals, that adult use market that is going to be like, yeah, oh yeah, they smoke, that's fine, it's cool. People aren't going to care about it as much because they know it's also a component of the medicine that they're taking, or their supplements, or, the question that I've wanted to ask you for a little bit now, when CBD became hot, you had so many farmers that rushed to put it in the ground because they were told that there'd be someone there to buy it for them, right? And that didn't exactly happen to some of them. And my first thought was, okay, well, why can't we take those plants that they planted and turn it into industrial hemp? Is there a huge genetic difference in the quote unquote hemp that you grow to produce CBD versus what you would need for industrial hemp? Or is it just the decortication process that people haven't mastered?
So there's a few things to unpack there. From a high level, traditionally drug type, high cannabinoid producing, genetics or varieties had some pretty significant differences from your more traditional industrial hemp varieties that had been bred.
Okay.
A lot of them came from Europe and China, where most of the heavy lifting, in the last 30, 40 years in terms of industrial hemp was done, and even in Canada. But the reality is, and what we've done is we're all hybridizing these different varieties now. We've got industrial hemp varieties from our germplasm collection in Europe. We've got obviously high cannabinoid producers, and from our work in that space. So we're mixing and matching all of those, and really looking at specific traits and opportunities to have what we would call a multi-use crop. The reality is that when you think about most of your cannabis plants, whether they're hemp or not, but something like CBD, which would probably more closely resemble our cannabis or regulated cannabis plants. The reality is that for a lot of industrial applications, if you can apply the right processing, so you mentioned decortification and there really is there's an opportunity for the byproducts from the cannabis and the hemp world to become important ingredients for construction materials, pressed woods, even paper, textiles. Now, when you start looking at specialty applications of fiber, so things like specific textiles that are similar to cotton, for example, right, and something soft that you might wear on your on your clothing. Or even more specific fiber applications for really high strength, different ropes and cords, or certain types of building materials, then there starts to be some difference, right? You don't want to just take your leftover, stalks and stems and put them into, kind of bulk materials processing, right? You're looking for very specific fiber qualities, which are really developed through plant breeding, to get those results. So it's a little bit of both. And I think there's a lot of, I think there's a big opportunity for, again, helping close the loop on the supply chain with, a lot of cannabis leftovers and stalks. It all gets ground up and thrown in the trash, right? Because of our regulations and the laws and everything. That could honestly be used for a lot of other things, even things as simple as like animal bedding. So, I think there's still a lot of growth and opportunity, and we really, we're big believers in regenerative agriculture, regenerative processes, cradle to grave, and being able to, use renewable resources. And I think, cannabis and hemp byproducts represent a huge opportunity to do that now, even without, building up, huge parts of the supply chain.
So, I mean, we truly are just at the tip of the iceberg when it comes to cannabis as a whole, right? I mean, there's so much more opportunity that we just can't take advantage of because of either regulation or, people just maybe not have the knowledge. Like you said, if we get to a point where there's literally no waste from a cannabis crop, I mean, it's crazy. I think people from the outside think we're all crazy because we talk about all the things that this plant can do from a wellness standpoint, from a medical standpoint, from an industrial standpoint. The fact that it contributes to social or can contribute to social equity, the fact that that it can contribute to help getting nonviolent offenders out of jail that have been put in jail for this, the fact it helps with racial. When I say helps loosely with racial inequality, and then you have the medical, the wellness, the industrial component to it. It almost sounds like we're bullshitting people because of all the different things it can do. But reality in the conversation we're having right now, it seems like we're only talking about a small percentage of what the overall capabilities might be going forward.
Yeah, we're really just getting started. And you hit on something else that's really important, which is the social impact and, and all of undoing all of the wrong that's been done, to people's families and to their lives for the last, I mean, gosh, almost 100 years now, right? It's disturbing to say the least. And so, there's still a lot of work to do there. There are groups that are starting to do some of that, but I think, there needs to be more of that. We've started to see states, erase charges and things like that, but there's really still a lot of work to do there. So that's just another aspect. I think when it comes to the big picture, the answer is yes, it is real. When we look at it from a crop perspective, right? So if I look at let's say cotton or soy or corn or some of these other commodity crops, and I look at what it takes to generate the same yield per acre. And you think about all of the inputs that are required for those crops, because those crops are highly specialized, right? They're generally really focused on one thing that they deliver, right? And so what's happened is their ability to be naturally pest resistant, climate resilient, those types of things are not necessarily there. So it requires all of these additional inputs and modification a lot of times to support, high yielding products. In cannabis, because of all of the different compounds that it produces, it actually represents an opportunity to, it can compete and I think will outcompete any of those other crops from an input perspective, meaning that we can breed, and we are breeding and developing cannabis plants that can thrive on very little water, that can thrive with, certain, soil profiles that maybe aren't ideal, right? We can breed, and we're developing plant varieties that are resistant to different diseases and pests. Some of the pests that require significant pesticide applications, out in the field, right? Cannabis can be bred, and in combination with regenerative agricultural approaches, you can actually, you can grow large acreage and get really good yields without getting decimated by some of these pests and without having to use a bunch of pesticides. So it really does represent, I think, the next stage of evolution in terms of regenerative agriculture and being able to do things more effectively, more efficiently, and still deliver some of the same high value ingredients and products that we need in our supply chain.
It amazes me when we talk about these things because we lost 75 years of potential progress on this plant because of a bullshit media billionaire, William Randolph Hearst, right? The guy who started, and that's my uneducated opinion on it, but it's amazing to me that we're just picking this up, and a lot of the problems that this country and the world generally have right now, I don't want to say it can be solved, but cannabis can be used to at least start to address those problems, whether it's sustainability and all the other things that we mentioned. Where do you guys get a lot of your information from? Are you looking to other countries that have been studying? Because there's not a ton of studies available here outside the University of Mississippi, which doesn't have in what I understand, the best products to actually test. Do you look to countries like Israel and others that have been studying this to base a lot of your theses off of?
It's an interesting question. So within our team, we have, well over 100 years of cannabis genomics and plant breeding R&D in our team. And so we've got, I think, 9 PhDs on staff, and a number of folks that have been working with cannabis for quite a long time. So we certainly stay up to speed like any other, research category. We stay up to speed with what's out in the literature, what the other scientists out in the world are doing. And, we certainly feed off that. We also, are writing papers actively. Our team is publishing all the time. I think we just had another publication in the last few months, but, they're constantly pushing the envelope. So it's not just, our R&D team, but there's other really great, scientific and R&D teams around the world that they're doing that. And we're all, we all build off of each other, right? And sometimes, it's certainly competitive, right? You're always trying to be the first one to make this discovery over this one. And, and so it's certainly competitive. It's always been that way in science and biotech. And it's no different here, but yeah, there's a lot to learn and a lot to build off of. But honestly, a lot of it is, we're more or less writing the book on a lot of this. Our team, our R&D team under Dr. Reggie Godino, who came over from Steep Hill, they have been studying, the plant and the chemistry of it and the genetics and the genomics and all of the science and the underlying biology of it for quite a while. And even before some of that team went to Steep Hill, they were longtime scientists and researchers of the plants. And some of them are one's a professor at UC Davis who does lecturing on different chemistry courses. So, around drug metabolites. So anyway, so we really have, we're actually not only looking to other scientists, but we're also writing some of the book ourselves.
Dude, that's awesome. And I appreciate you giving me another, we'll call it, I don't know, a bullet in the gun for the arguments that I mistakenly get into online sometimes when I have people trash this industry, and people are talking about the horrors that this plant does. And I'm just like, you're wrong. And I'll bring up people like Erica Daniels, who's focusing on autism, and to be able to point to your company and be like, oh yeah, we're a bunch of lazy stoners, but this one company has 9 PhDs on staff. So tell me how lazy they can be, right? So I appreciate you giving me that information. I love seeing what you guys are doing because I think it's just so needed in this industry, and it's really what's going to normalize it and advance it and really bring out a lot of the capabilities that this plant has. Looking forward, I mean, what are some of the exciting things that you guys are working on? I mean, it sounds like you said, you're writing the book on this, you're advancing it. I talk about to a lot of the investors in this space that they get to shape this industry, but in reality, from a scientific side, from a product side, that's exactly what you're doing. You're not, listen, the investors are great and they're funding the companies that should be funded, yours included, but you guys are really shaping the industry as far as what products and what the future are going to look like. So looking forward in the next 1, 2, 5 years, what are some of the things that really excite you that you guys are working on that you're allowed to share, of course?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's a lot of different things I could talk about here. So I have to pick a couple. I think overall, what really has me most excited is just the reality that our vision of building a cannabis genetics platform is coming to fruition. And, and it's basically, we've been able to put together all the different components of the platform: tissue culture, molecular-based breeding, greenhouse nursery operations, all of the different pieces that we do at our company. We've been able to use that platform and take, run the full cycle, right? Go taking a product from a concept, a genetic, in R&D, all the way through scale up, through productization, and then also have major customers and national brands partnering with us to get exclusive access to our product pipeline. So that's one of the most exciting things for me. One of the exciting parts of our initiatives, we're going to be, as I mentioned, launching a licensed or bringing our services and technology and the genetics platform to the regulated cannabis space in Colorado. So we have plans to launch that program this year. We're already in conversations with several groups within the space, in the Colorado market that are really excited about the product innovation that we can bring. Whether it's edibles or vapes or even just flower, I think some of the things that we can bring to the market are really, really exciting. And I think in a mature market like Colorado, look, it hit $2 billion this last year, right? And it's still growing. And, but I think consumers are looking for true innovation, right? And just like you see in CPG, they're looking for something different. They're looking for those next level products. So, that's one of the things that has me excited. We've developed several new genetics with terpene profiles and cannabinoids, things like THCV, which actually provide truly different experiences to the user, right? It's not just, a different flavor of your favorite cannabis variety. Some of these genetics actually, we've tried them. Our partners and customers are trying, and people are like, whoa, that's cool. That's real, right? It's like, hey, we're putting the caffeine back in Coke, right? So
wow.
It's really exciting. So that gets me really excited, and I think we're poised right now, because we've built this platform, and so as all of these large companies and brands and MSOs are really starting to grow, after the post-election momentum and the investment into the cannabis industry, I think we're poised to help them provide that product differentiation to our customers.
That's awesome, because at this point, right, you look at the recreational cannabis companies, or even some of the medical ones, and some do it better than others. Some have some good products. Everybody kind of has a strain that they associate with, but at the end of the day, it's all this. God, they're gonna kill me for saying this, but it's all the same shit in a different wrapper, right? Some people grow it better than others. Some people don't. It's flower, it's edibles, it's vapes. Everybody has the people that they associate with, but for the most part, it's a branding play. It's a marketing play, because at some point, good cannabis flower is good cannabis flower. It's like I was listening to Joe Rogan talk about the barbecue in Austin, Texas, right? And for anybody who's been to Austin, Texas, you've got Franklin's Barbecue, where there's a 4-hour line to get your brisket. You can go to Terry Black's Barbecue, and I promise you, and back up what Joe said, it's some of the best barbecue you've ever had in your life. And he said, Franklin's is good. It's not 4-hour line better, right? So at the end of the day, you've got a lot of people that are putting out the same product, but it's their marketing, it's their lifestyle brand, especially from the adult use. Now we're starting to see some innovation when it comes to beverages and edibles and everything else. But to hear you talk about focusing on different products, and not only products, but the makeup of those products, I have no clue what THCV is, but I'm very happy to stop just hearing, why is this the best? Well, because it has the highest THC percentage. Well, that doesn't really mean anything to me anymore, because I've started to educate myself. So to hear you talk about really focusing on terpene profiles, flavonoid profiles, and the different cannabinoids that I have no clue what they are. I remember on an older episode, I named like 8 or 9 of them, and I don't even think I can do that anymore, because I don't talk about them that often. But it's really cool to hear some of the things that you guys are doing, because that's how you're truly going to innovate in this industry and move it forward. So I'm excited. Can you talk like THCV? What are you able to explain the difference?
Yeah. So there's, just from a simple, anecdotal reporting perspective in terms of what people report, so some of the varieties that we're launching in California, and that we plan to put out, into the Colorado market, they're also high THC varieties. So they have, both THC and THCV. And, the experiences that people are talking about are the lack of the munchies, right? So it seems to help mitigate. And there's some scientific evidence, or at least limited data in the literature, around some of that. And there's certainly a lot of anecdotal evidence. There's nothing, there's no true clinical trials or studies yet on that kind of thing, but we're starting to see some of that data. So that's a really interesting effect. I think we've also seen, things like heard reports of energizing, so a slightly different experience, really. And, yeah, I have to say, it really is, it really is different. It's not, it's not I've tried it, and it's not the same as as your typical hybrid cannabis that you get. It's a really nice clean energizing type feeling that I think is really different, right? It's very different than what you get from most of the cannabis off the shelf. So
That's
really
awesome,
unique, and
man.
we're just getting started. We've got different terpene profiles we're matching with it, and I think we're really just getting started, and we're actively partnering with several folks to bring these things to market, because that's what we really want to see. Is we want to get these in the consumer hands, because I think people are really going to like it.
I'm excited for that, because you were speaking my language. For the most part, I try to find like a pure sativa that gives you that uplifting, almost like just kind of like, and the way I've heard it described, I don't like it because it compares it to a pharmaceutical, but that like Adderall type feeling where you can, you feel energized and focused. So you're speaking my language, man. I've got to ask you, because not only do you guys work with cannabis, you also work with coffee. So cannabis and coffee, two of my favorite things on the planet. Is there a similarity between the two of them? Because to be honest, I know this sounds weird as can be, but there are times where I brew a certain cup of coffee and my wife's like, why does the house smell like weed? I'm like, it's not, it's coffee. It's a very similar smell sometimes.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So from the organic chemist perspective, again, coffee is a very, very interesting plant. It produces lots of very interesting compounds, just like cannabis does. It's a class of compounds that includes caffeine. There's other derivatives in it as well, but they're all, they're a class of compounds that are generally stimulants. Obviously, caffeine being the most well-known. So, I think coffee is also a very different type of plant, right? It's, it's not an annual. It's not a grass. It's not something that grows and dies every year, right? It is a tree. It is a plant that takes, 3 to 5 years to produce its first fruit. And then they can live to be 30, 40, 50, 60 years old in terms of coffee trees. And they also primarily grow in tropical regions. They've got very unique growing environments that they like. So very different plant, but again, same thing. It's a unique plant that has a lot of very interesting compounds. And they're, while they're not the same as cannabinoids, they're certainly unique compounds. And there's things like flavonoids and terpenes and other things that give different plants and products from those plants their flavors and smells. So you certainly see some of that in coffee as well.
Very cool, man. I mean, you work with two of my favorite things on the planet between cannabis and coffee. And speaking of the planet, and I'm sure a lot of people will ask you this, but you guys actually sent coffee tissues up to the International Space Station as well. I know that kind of detracting from the whole conversation we had, but you sent something into space. So, I mean, obviously great accomplishment, really cool partnership, but can you talk to us about the effects? I mean, there's got to be at some point when regulations die down, intention to send cannabis to space too.
Yeah, so it was really it was the first generation experiment. It was a collaboration with Bioserve, the group out of the aerospace engineering department at University of Colorado Boulder. They've been doing, honestly, leading some of the space research over the last few decades, and a lot of close collaboration with the International Space Station. So we partnered with them and another company called Space Technology Holdings that's pursuing different applications of space research or zero gravity research into different product categories. So we partnered with all of them, and the goal was really to understand how being up in space, affects potentially at the genomic level some of these different plant materials. And there's precedence for this. There's been other crops that have been sent up to space, and whether they've been grown as actual plants in little baby greenhouses in the space craft or the space station. There's also been what we did, was sending up tissue culture. So there's been a lot of different studies on, or at least a handful of different studies on plants. And what we see is that there's actually sometimes there's changes and mutations, and the longer a plant grows in that zero gravity environment, the more these changes become apparent. So it's still very early stage research, and I think there's still some interesting opportunities there. And from us, it was a chance to to work with some great partners. And again, we sent up some hemp tissue culture material as well to the space station, along with some coffee callus, and then we brought it back 30 days later in collaboration with those groups, and I think we actually went up on a SpaceX flight. And so it was really exciting. We've done some genomic studies on the material that came back, and we're hoping to continue those areas of what I call very early stage research, in addition to some of the other work we're doing.
Very cool. Yeah, I'm sure the astronauts, reached back out and they said, "Hey guys, we asked for coffee and cannabis. This wasn't what we were talking about."
Yeah, no, they got petri dishes. Yeah, I'm sure we can. We'll try to do better for them next time. But unfortunately, given the regulations right now, they're pretty strict on what you can take in space. So it's.
Very cool, man. Dude, that is absolutely incredible, the work that you're doing. I'm really excited to start seeing the results of what's going to come from it, especially a lot of what you're working on the genetics side, and just, from the conversation. So we are coming to the end of our time together here, so I don't want to hold you too long. I already asked you what you're excited to work on going forward. So before we let you go, I wanted to circle back to Mountain Flower Dairy, because it's just kind of out of different from all the other things that you did, right? Where you really, I saw something that's saying that a lot, there are people who don't realize that milk doesn't come from a bottle, that it comes from, actual animals and everything else. And it also said that there's a focus on teaching people animal husbandry, which is only a term I've heard comedians use. I don't know what it actually is. So tell us a little bit about the nonprofit and your work there, because it sounds like you really learned a lot about, farming and taking care of animals and really getting your hands dirty in this kind of natural regenerative space. And I feel like that leads to a lot of your passion in cannabis as well too.
Yeah, absolutely. So it started, I guess it's been almost 10 years now, maybe 8 years ago when we started Mountain Flower Dairy. But it was really, honestly, my inspiration for it started, I was working in the food safety space, and, really doing a deep dive on large scale food processing and then how we can detect foodborne pathogens, things like Salmonella, Listeria, E. coli, in primarily, agricultural products, both from the animal and the plant side. And, unfortunately got to see, the inside of some of the industries, and especially when you look at animal agriculture. And it really was, it was really, really disappointing to see. And so, so we set up Mountain Flower to really be an educational nonprofit to bring awareness around, what it takes to produce the cheese and the dairy products that we like, and the meat products and the leather products, and, all the different pieces when you start thinking about whether it's raising goats or cattle or sheep or any number of them. And a lot of people, want to demand for, organic and sustainable practices, and, treating the animals, fairly and all that. But most people don't realize how hard all of that is to do, and still try to produce food that people can afford. And so, it was really about connecting the dots. And, in a place like Boulder and the Front Range, where we've got a really high population of really smart and talented people, it was always surprising to see the disconnect, right, between our food and our food system, and what we really want and what it actually takes to get there. So that's really what we did. And we ended up picking goats as the model, just because they're kind of funny and cute, and they're a lot more fun. And so, it was really, really a lot of fun. And they've done really well over the years. They also started doing fun things like goat yoga. So they did that, which was kind of a new thing that we hit the scene with, I guess, 6 or 7 years ago now. And, and then a bunch of summer camps and educational workshops for kids, for adults, for people with special needs, kind of done it all. Big volunteer workforce. And actually, I think just this last year, they merged with another nonprofit in Boulder that's on the same farm. called Growing Gardens, and they've run a long-standing nonprofit in Boulder that has a farm stand in the summer where they give youth the opportunity to learn about organic farming and selling fruits and vegetables. And they have this big community garden right in the middle of Boulder. So it's it really is cool to see where that nonprofit went. And I definitely is part of how I fell in love with agriculture. I mean, I've always loved animals and plants. I've always been fascinated by plants, and and that's kind of how I got into chemistry originally. But yeah, to really get my hands dirty, so to speak, and work on the farm and help build that was really a unique opportunity, and it definitely is what pushed me, more and more towards, hey, let's take your career more towards agriculture. That's where you can really have some impact, and the ability to do that with and around cannabis is just I feel pretty lucky to be able to work in these areas.
Very cool, man. Well, in summary, both your job and your hobby are making the world a better place. So I'm very much appreciative of that.
We're trying to. I just like goats and cannabis and science and improving human health. That's what I'm after. So it's pretty fun.
Well, you're making advances in both coffee and cannabis for me. So I'm a fan, man. I've really appreciated your time in the conversation. And before we let you go, let's tell people where they can find you, where they can find Front Range. If you want to mention, how they can help out your 501c3 as well. Let's get all the plugs out.
Yeah, absolutely. So frontrangebio.com is our website. You can find us on Facebook, LinkedIn as well, Instagram. FRB Genetics is our cannabis genetics program and brand. So frbgenetics.com. That's something that's just going live actually this week. And we reach out to us if you're a cannabis grower in Colorado, California. And then in hemp, we work with hemp growers all over the country, all over the world. And so, you can certainly find us there. And the nonprofit side, mountainflowerdairy.com, and then Growing Gardens is the other nonprofit now that they've merged with. So they certainly take donations all year long. Last year was a tough year, like it was for everybody with COVID. So they're always happy to get support, and they host fundraisers and initiatives throughout the year to keep it going.
Very cool, man. Well, thank you for joining us, and I hope we'll have you back on 6 months, a year from now, and talk about all the progress you guys have made.
Absolutely, we're happy to join anytime, and I really appreciate the opportunity. It's been fun.
Very cool. Well, thank you again. And thank you everybody at home for tuning in. Of course, if you missed any part of this interview and you want to check it out, you can A, just rewind, but B, it'll be live on YouTube and all of our audio platforms next week. Just find it youtube.com/elevateyourgrind, Apple, Spotify, all that good stuff. Just search for Elevate Your Grind. Tomorrow, we're going to be live with Cameron Clark of Sunderstorm. You can check that out at facebook.com/cannabusinessgroup at 6:30 p.m. And then on Thursday, we're going to have one of our weekly chapter meetings. It's actually going to be an awesome panel on the future of cannabis in 2021, anchored by Rosie Matteo of Matteo Communications and Cynthia Salarizada of Green Market Report, Access Wire, House of Stock, and like 19 other cannabis companies that she's had a hand in. So Cynthia and Rosie are two awesome people. That is not one you are going to want to miss. You can find that at joinclab.com. And then, of course, join us on February 6th for the annual C-Lab conference, whether that's in person at Sacred Space. Remember, we will be taking COVID-19 precautions, or whether you're going to attend virtual. You can find that information at joinclab.com. Folks, it's been another episode of Elevate Your Grind, and we will see you tomorrow.